how to achieve star fields and nebulas with just noise, no more than just a noise. Noise is a very powerful tool that you can use and explore. There's many different applications, as you know, how to use a noise, and it's very useful for creative purposes as well, as we're gonna see. So let's start with the star field first, and we're gonna use a noise, as I said before, and this is only what you have to have in order for you to achieve that first layer. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drop this one here. I'm gonna drop the size as well, and you see what we have. We already have what we were looking for, pretty much. You see, you have that stuff that you can use this as a star field, and you can have more or less stars depending on how much, for example, you have in terms of size, which although it's a size, it will also give you the sense of more stars. But where you really want to change that is going to be here on the gain. So the gain will give you more or less stars, and the gamma also, although it's gamma, so you know the intensity of these stars will differ, and maybe that's a good idea. As you can see, you have like, seems like you have like different depths that you can use as a star field. Now, this is all you have to do really for the star field, but sometimes we need to go on a more creative, cheesy kind of look, and to do that we also have to use colors. So I'm gonna tell you a way that I normally use to achieve random colors that I think can be very beneficial. So what I do is, with a color wheel, I'm gonna do this, and I want just the color. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop a reformat here, and beforehand I'm gonna use a transform that I'm just gonna grow, maintaining the format that I want. But it's not over yet, because what the problem is giving the color wheel what it is, the center is going to be white, and yes, you have like very random distribution, but without a doubt that the center is really white. So what I normally like to do is to use an expression, and with the expression I'm just gonna truncate every single channel, and you'll see what the result will be. So TCL, the truncate function is called trunk, and then I'm gonna truncate the red channel like this, and then the green channel like this, and then the blue channel like this. And as you can see, what this will give you is all the channels separate without any variation in their value or saturation. So this is what we're going to use, okay? Without anything that we did before, this is what we would have. So we just did this, okay? And now if you blur from this point onwards, you can have also a similar look, but you know, the center is not going to be white anymore. So this is like one of the tips that I would like to talk about today, and this is the difference. You see, really white, not so white. And now you can do, you know, a normal multiplication between these two guys, and this will give you random colors also on your stars. So let's see what this will give you. There you go. If you look now, you have some stars with some colors, and you can vary this color as much as you want. You can have a different distribution of these colors if you want to. And one thing that we're going to use this for is to do our nebulas, as we discussed before. And a variation of this technique would be to use a U-shift, and assuming that you are happy with this initial distribution, the U-shift will basically vary on the rotation, vary this like that, okay? Which means that every time that you have a U-shift on top of the other, the distribution will change again, okay? Of course, if you are on the limits, it's not a very good idea, okay? If you are on 180 degrees or minus 180 degrees, not a good idea. But if you have something in between, say for example like this, and then you put another one on top, every time that you have a different one, you're gonna have a different distribution of the colors for free, okay? You don't have to look more for this. So let's assume that this is the first part of our star field and we are happy with it. I think the saturation is a little bit too strong, so maybe let's just drop a saturation node in here, just drop the saturation a bit, because we just want a little bit of color, but we don't want color everywhere. We can vary, you know, the size a bit, changing the scale. It's whatever works for you really. So let's assume that this is exactly what we want as a starting point for our star field. In terms of nebulas, again, we're going to use the noise again, and there are three important layers for nebulas, I would say. So if you look for images on the internet regarding nebulas, there's always like one of the layers which is like sort of the cosmic dust kind of a thing, which you don't have like a lot of breakup or anything like that. It's more like a sheet of random colors that goes either on top or behind every single portion of the whole star field, including the nebulas. So that's one of the key moments for nebulas, I would say. And then you have different levels of breakup, and all of them, this combined, that's what's gonna give you the desired look. So let's go with the first layer, as I said. So let's open a noise, And as I said, this will be the cosmic dust kind of situation here. So the idea is not to have a lot of breakup. Okay, so we're just gonna drop probably the linearity a bit, this stuff in here as well. This needs to be big, so let's say that this is kind of okay. The cool thing about this is you never know what you're gonna get, which is also part of the fun of dealing with these things. So let's say that this is enough for me now, and now I'm gonna use a version, as I said, a version of these colors, but not exactly the same way. So I'm gonna use a U shift, and I'm just gonna drop the slider for rotation there, and I should have like a different type of thing in here. So this is what we're gonna have for this guy. I'm gonna use a multiply, and I'm gonna multiply those wavy forms coming from the noise with that color. So that's one of them. And by the way, I'll always like to have like a clamp in here. So I'm gonna clamp all the values in here because some of them probably will go above 1. So I just want to make sure that no values will go above 1. So this is one of them. Then the other one will be, I'm gonna put this as a default, will be something with a little bit more breakup. So for example, this stuff in here. Okay, so something like this, maybe vary things a bit. And I'm gonna use the same clamp. And now I'm going to use a U shift on top of the previous one, which will give me a different color. So before we had this, now we have this. So I'm going to multiply these two guys, and this result will go on top of the previous one as a plus or as a over. It depends on what you want to go for. Let's start this with a plus. Now, there's a quite big jump between these two layers, so we need to bring them a little bit close together. So maybe let's have a little bit more breakup on the dust, the cosmic dust part, maybe. Okay, and now let's have another one like this with even more breakup. Again, there's no right or wrong, it's whatever works. Okay, let's do the same thing. So another U shift, multiply here. So multiply the new colors by the new layer, and then a plus merging these to the previous two. And this is what we have. Be too strong, but we can change this later on. As I said, it's way too saturated, especially that last one there is very saturated. It's this one here, so let's drop the saturation down quite a lot. And let's say that this is okay. This is now where you're gonna start messing with the different noises to just get where or what you really want out of these things. I'm just gonna tweak things a bit here just to see if I can have things closer to what I want, because at the moment I'm not entirely happy with what I have. So I'm gonna tweak things slightly. So after tweaking things, this is what I have, and now the idea is to merge the stars with this. So once you merge things, you see that things will start to look a little bit more interesting as we have in here. And now, although this is the final merge that you're gonna have, now there's a lot of other things that you can do. So I'm gonna do one by one and then explain what was my thought process behind what we're gonna do. So first thing that I like to do is to drop a glow, because the glow, it's a very important part for the look. So I'm gonna use my glow. You can use yours. It's whatever works. Okay, something like this. It's looking a little cool, and then you can have a different version of the glow based on the luminance beforehand. You just isolate that part and use another glow like this. So you can have a different treatment for those parts only. Then you merge the two with a plus, and it's a variation on how the glow looks like. Just you have the core being treated a little bit different. And again, you can spend endless hours on this thing. It's really up to you. But we will continue developing the look. But there's a very important thing that we should do at the end when they're merged together, which is I'm going to use a remove. So we remove everything just to keep the format. Usual thing that I do that you probably notice by now. And then I'm going to use a radial that will follow basically that format. I'm just going to slightly change it to something a little bit more round like this. And this is actually the part that I want to reveal from the nebulous. And you'll see that after looking at some references, this is always what you're going to have. You normally have things more visible at the center and less visible at the sides. So let's put this as a multiply, and you'll see what I'm saying. Okay, things will instantly start looking a little bit more realistic, and then you can grow this in any way you want. So maybe a grow filter with a Gaussian filter, it's actually a good idea, you see, but this is actually a very important piece of the puzzle. And then you can vary this as much as you want, but this already is starting to look a little bit more realistic to what you probably would have in your mind to develop. And then you will continue developing this part of of the look, which is the nebulous. But you know, these colors, they came from free just by doing this stuff. You know, it's very, very easy to do these kind of things. So let's keep developing the look on the nebulous in the same way that we did this for the different layers of the nebulous that we have so far. It's also very important to think of different layers with different sizes to introduce extra breakup. What I'm saying is, if I have a noise like this and I'll change things so it becomes a little bit like that, I can use this as a stencil, and this will introduce me some breakup on the overall thing, and this can be quite effective. So if I now have this guy here, see, you are eating some of these things, and the idea is to have different versions of this guy, so you'll have different looks of how things will look breakup wise. So I end up using 3 different noises. So the difference between with breakup and not with breakup is this. Okay, breakup really, really important to have when you're developing looks, as you probably know, which, you know, it's just punching holes on the previous look basically. Now, one little tip that I would like to give you in situations like this is one thing that works really well when you try to introduce some volume as a 2D cheat. You can actually use a noise to distort things. So if I use a noise like this, and if I introduce this as vectors on both axes, U and V, if I use an I distort, let's see what this gives us. So if I start messing with this guy, you're gonna feel like this will give you some more interest. Now, and also very important thing to have when you're dealing with nebulous like this is glow. Glow is usually important for the realism of what we're trying to achieve in here. But instead of applying the glow generically like this, we're gonna just isolate the brightest parts that we have, you know, in here. So if we go with a keyer like this, we're gonna have this copied as a alpha, we're gonna have this pre-malted, and this is the part only that we want to have as being glowed. But this time I'm gonna have this like really round with a blur, and this is what we're gonna have on top. But I want this, in this case, to be a little bit more dramatic kind of effect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the aspect ratio to be something like this. Of course, this is way too big, so I'm just gonna change things slightly. So I actually tamed this down quite a lot, and what I ended up having was just these bits in here that I had to achieve by changing the luminous map with a keyer. So I just added just those little things there, just the really, really hot spots there. But this will be very effectively at the end. Let's not forget that we always have to look at the end result like this, and this looks like something with volume already. So, you know, the difference between using this and not using this, it's that little chord there. You know, it's all those little details that makes things a bit more successful. We're not over yet. There's also a very important piece, which is the volumetrics. So what we're going to use for volumetrics is the volume rays. We're going to use them at the center of our interest region, somewhere here, you know, something like this. And what we have to do is put this just a tiny bit as a plus back on top. It's way too much, so we need to have something, but just a tiny bit. It all adds up to the end result. So you have something like coming from the inside, it seems. And one thing that I always like to do also with the noise is to have another breakup on this guy. So it breaks that perfection a bit. This needs to be fairly big. And then, you know, if we want the star field to be a bit more present, of course, you can always go with a multiply here and just bump those stars a bit more. Okay. One thing that I also would like to do with the stars is, again, glow. Glow, as I said, always helps. We can go something really cheesy like this, just to vary things a bit, why not? And always with stars, what I like to have is a different one, just a touch of anamorphic feeling to it. I use this as a plus. You know, a bit too much, so I can reduce this in here. The end result will be something like this, and you can see that this is already starting to look like something very different. So this is what we have. One thing that I would like to call your attention to, that it can be really cool, which is normally when we look some of the images on the internet regarding nebulous, we have sort of like, you know, vortex feeling to it, and we can achieve that with an ST map. So the idea would be, so for example, around this region here, before we do this type of stuff, would be to use that kind of thing with an ST map, because it gives us more flexibility. So let's do that. So this is what I did, an ST map, radial, transform just down, and use this to then use this as a rotation here. Because it's so blurry, we're gonna have this type of result. And if you use this cautiously, not like fully developed, and use this as an ST map, we're gonna have this type of stuff. you see. So you can now have more or less of that thing depending on how much you are dissolving. Okay, let's leave this as it was and let's see the end result, because it's all about the end result. And you see what I'm saying? It's now possible to have that kind of feeling, more or less. It all depends on how you want to do this. You can then develop your look depending on where you want to go for. So I end up like just changing things slightly, and this is what I end up having. Very cheesy kind of a look. You can have as many looks as you want. There's many different looks that you can have. Of course, this is way exaggerated on the stars part, but it's always up to you how much you want to mix these things, you know. It can be as cheesy as you'd like to, and only based on noises. As you can see, from the actual star field to nebulous, everything was done with noises. Let me show you different examples. So this is the one that we just discussed. This is a different look based on the same techniques, exactly the same ones, but complete different looks. And the same goes for this one here, which is not as interesting. But you know, you saw me doing it, developing, all based on noises. And as you can see, with the same technique, once again, you can achieve many different things. It's always up to what you want to do, how you want to do it, and how creative you want to go with these things. But as you can see, just the noise itself can give you a lot of power on the creative side of things, as we just discussed now. And hopefully you took some insights from what we discussed today. I hope you liked it, and see you next time.